Good morning and welcome to Gana Shot. Gana Shot में आप सबका स्वागत है. Today I'm touching up on something very interesting. How does India deal with an aging China and that which is greedy, right? And my thumbnail says a lot. Already there's a feeling that the elephant is going to catch the dragon by its tail. This cartoon, not my original thinking, it is someone else's. I've just lifted it to show you what the reality is. What is the reality of a perception which is gaining international thinking? And also Z on crutches. These are not my ideas. These are ideas which are in international social media, mainstream media, and wherever. Then we have a problem. I mean, we have to understand this problem that China is our next door neighbor. How do you deal with it? Normally, we think of dealing with it on, military basis, economic basis, EVs and this and that and Himalayas and all that. While that may be so, the two important factors in the India-China discussion, which I thought are very important and which need to be understood. The first, India's rise is unstoppable. And this is something which I've been very firm on. You might disagree with the pace of change. You might disagree with many things, but I grant the pace of change, what I say might vary, but the direction of change won't. India has only one way to go, up. You can't stop 1.4 billion people from achieving what they want to. That's the first thing. Second, China is aging at the fastest rate in human history. It's also declining demographically at the fastest rate in human history. Unprecedented. It is an unnatural decline. And it is a decline triggered by the Communist Party of China. That's the second fact, which is indisputable. It is happening. It is happening in front of our eyes. Many of us choose not to see this thing which is coming. Right. Be that as it may, why did I take this topic in this particular manner? I'm examining this completely demographically. I'm not looking at military, I'm not looking at economy, I'm not looking at anything. This is completely demographic in nature. This is societal in nature, this is psychological in nature, and this is natural in nature. Nature is coming to the fore in this whole story. Why? Again, why? There is these days, past few days, I see a lot of commentary on depopulation, aging populations, and all that. And they're not specific to China. Right. Simultaneously, there are articles which are specific to China. But those voices are not being heard. 4 years back, 5 years back, when I started talking of this and writing about it, people thought I was mad. I'll be very honest with you. People thought I was mad. In fact, one ambassador, in an open thing, when I said China is going to decline, he looked at me as if I'm straight out of a lunatic asylum. I couldn't explain to him. He says, "Oh, China has got the biggest manufacturing, all that." And you say it's declining. There's an open public forum in a lit fest. I said, "Look, you don't understand it. I'll talk to you tomorrow." But that's a different story. The reality has not changed. And this is what I'm going to put across. And it's not only that reality has not changed, what is happening is not uh, well understood by people. But it's happening, the change is happening at pace internationally. Something we need to understand. So, largely, a lot of this, what I'm going to speak today, is maybe theoretic. Okay, maybe theoretic, but it has got a strategic bias. So, from there, we'll see how do we deal in India with this. This article, the coming Pax Geriatrica. So, this article is about the geriatrics of the world. It's not just China. But I have picked China because China is our neighbor. I couldn't care less if USA becomes old or Europe becomes old. I'll handle that. But I need to handle China in India. So that is why I picked up these articles, which are international trend lines, and cherry picked those which are concerning China. And I'm going to present this to you through a theoretical construct. But the theoretical construct is not so theoretical because things are unfolding on ground. That's the point. Okay. Next thing. This is another article. Both Foreign Affairs. Foreign Affairs gives very good articles. You might like them or not like them, but they're thought-provoking. They're backed with facts, data, X, Y, Z. The age of depopulation. This came about a couple of months back. This one on Pax Geriatrica came out 2 days back. In fact, not even 2, maybe a week back. So I kept reading it. I kept reading these both. And I found many things. Then this post by Yi Fuxian. Now, Yi Fuxian, for those of you who don't know, is a Chinese. He wrote a book called The Empty Nest, which is about China, its depopulation, things like that. And what he said, the Chinese didn't like. So he ran away from China. And he's gone. He's otherwise a gynecologist, incidentally. He's a gynecologist. So he is now a professor in the University of Wisconsin in Madison. And he writes. And he writes fairly well about Chinese demography. And he correlates demography with many things on China. While he might not always be right, his fundamentals about these issues, the demographic factor, are quite good. What does he say? And he's been maintaining this now for the past 10 years. He says China's population should be less than 1.28 billion. Okay, but more than 1.2 billion. I've analyzed this in various academic papers. It's a fact. That's the basis of his book. And he's established this properly. So let's look at 1.28 billion. Definitely it's not 1.4 billion, it's 1.28 billion. If that be so, China's economy has already started showing strains of this factor. Okay. Now I'll go back to this fundamental graph which I've been using for the past 3 years. This is a UN graph on populations and China. This is the graph of Chinese population by age group. The age group 25 to 64 this is the way it is growing. 0 to 14, this is the way it's growing. 15 to 24, you see it is growing this way. Okay? And 65 plus, the old age cohort is going this way. And these are immutable. These are broad trend lines. But these were based on Chinese data which were false. That's the point. Now, when you convert these into actual figures, I did it 2 years back. So you'll see 2023, 2020, 30, 2040, and 2050. But I'm not going to look so far ahead. I'm going to look up to 2030. And 2030 is just 5 years ahead. So this is the chart which comes out. If you see 2023, its population was supposed to be 1410. We'll go at this point of time with that. And by 2030, You will see the 65 plus group going up to 250 million people. The population between 25 to 64, which is the working age population, reducing by 20 million. And further, there's a decrease in 0 to 14 and 15 to 24. 15 to 24 is that population which is going to enter the workforce. But significantly, there are going to be 60 million more people by 2030. 2030 is not far, it's just 5 years ahead. And this is unstoppable because these people are old and they're living in China. They're not living anywhere else. The figures at the bottom, 0 to 14 or 15 to 24, might vary because these are the times when, 20, 30 years back, figures were cooked. But the actual people, old people who are living is this. That's not changed. Right. Now, what is it in the overall analysis which comes out? And in one analysis, it says in 2019, the 60 plus, I'm now not going to 65 as per this table, 60 plus. The 60 plus were 254 million and 65 were 176 million in China. In 2030, 25% will be over 60. 25% of China will be over 60. Okay. 2040, this will go up to 402 million. Okay. Right. And out of this is important. This is something very interesting and important. Out of this, 75% will have non-communicable diseases like diabetes, cardiovascular diseases, hypertension, and all that, which is common to any old age set of people. All of us are. In fact, I am also in that same bracket. Some light hypertension, light diabetes. Everyone is, old. We are all. The moment when I was 60, I was fit. Slowly over now 9 years, 69, I find all these have crept in. I am no more productive. This number is increasing in China. They don't contribute to the Chinese growth. They detract from Chinese growth. Okay, this is as per the UN figures, Chinese figures, which we know is wrong. So what does E. Fuxian say? He says, look, I've taken the upper limit, what he said. 1280. That is 1.28 billion. Based on this, by 2030, those 60 plus will be about 30 to 35%. That is 1/3 of China will be over 60 with all the attendant problems. And when you look at it ahead, 5 years ahead, this might even get worse. At this point of time, it may be 30. By another 5 years, it will be 35. After that, the fall will be very, very, very steep. Because then the population fall also starts showing off very high. This is a very important facet which we tend to discount. A lot of what China is trying to do now is to offset this factor, which no one can stop. No one can stop. No one can stop. Even God can't stop it. It's like this. This arrow was shot by Deng Xiaoping when he implemented the one-child policy. So he says, look, the population is below 1.28 billion. And we've shown about 30% today are aged over 60. So there are implications of this. And that is what I'm now going to go ahead. What did he say? I mean, let's see his own analysis before I come to my analysis. He says in 2004, he had predicted in his book that 2012 would be the turning point, and from there population decline started. So actually population decline in China is now over 12 years old. It's not new. But mainstream economists in China said, no, we'll continue to grow. And we all believed it, and they will surpass USA. It's not there. It's not happening. And China's growth rate actually started dipping in 2012. This is all you have Fiction's analysis. He says India's, I mean, this is something which I'm not confident, I'm not sure, but I'll read it out because that's what he's written. He says India's economy will surpass China's and even America's, not tomorrow, but in 20, 30 years. The Chinese says our economy will surpass them. Okay. And the funny part is whatever he has said so far has come true for China. I've been reading him now for about 8, 9 years. And then he says, don't mock the poor youth. India's economy has risen from the 12th largest to the 4th, soon to be the 3rd with ferocious momentum. And that's a truth which we have to all understand. And then he says something about manufacturing, which again is in historical context is right. He says the world's factory has shifted from Britain to the US to Germany, Japan, and China is likely to be the last factory. Okay. After this, there won't be any factory because we're going to defactorize, and that's happening, and it is irreversible, and it will happen because no one can afford to have a complete manufacturing in China, which can twist everyone's tail. That is happening. It's a matter of time. At the onset of COVID, I said 5 years. Given 5 years, it's already started happening. China is taking certain actions, which everyone knows, but people are increasingly shifting away from China. That has peaked. He says India's manufacturing of global market cannot reach China's level. I agree with him completely. Will never be that level of manufacturing. But our manufacturing and growth will be in sync with our economic share globally. We will increase, but we will never become another China. And we should not be another China. We should be a better India. That's what I've always been saying. I'm okay. We don't want to compete with China, but we'll get different power. We'll get different metrics. We'll get different powers. We'll get different ways to reach our power. That's a different story. I'll talk of it. Today we're talking of China. He says the young workforce is the true demographic dividend that will drive India's economic prosperity. I see that happening, despite what many people say. Right? India's manufacturing sector struggles to replicate China's success is a given. Now, China relied on the US markets to become the world's factory. It was the US which drove it. But then US market is now being increasingly closed off. Therefore, Indian manufacturing must depend on domestic demand for growth, which will take time but will succeed. And this is something no one can stop. We have our own demand. If we can hike up our manufacturing, you can deal with China, you can deal with USA because we drive our own growth. And this is one attribute which no other country has. Not even USA at this point of time. That is one of the reasons which drives India's strategic autonomy. People don't realize it, but this is the fact. You are a consuming economy. And if you can put some manufacturing into it, you're through. And this is what America is trying. It is a consuming economy. It wants to get manufacturing. It's struggling. We can. Why do you think Britain has done a FTA with us? Okay. Another interesting factor. He says in 1929, the median age of USA was 26. Okay. Then 65 plus was just 5%. In 1980, it was 30, with 65 plus as 11%. Slowly increasing. But USA has offset its age problem through immigration, which China doesn't. Then later on in one of his analysis, he says China's median age is 43 years today. 65 plus is 16% today. By 2050, The median age will be 58 years with 65 at 36%. 65 plus, then 60 plus will be nearly 40-45%. You're really looking at an old age society. What will it be in 5 years? The average Chinese will be 46, 47, 48. USA had the demographic capital for advancement. So do we. In fact, we have the best demographics for all this. It will last us another 20, 30 years. After that, we will also decline. But that's a thing for another day, because today I'm looking at China. As per him, China is already running out of human strength, and they have to strive to survive. Okay. Then they gives a very interesting graph. This is very interesting. And this is probably, he says this red graph is what they estimated to be the total fertility rates. And the blue graph is what is the actual fertility rates in China. And today, all of them in China are coming to it's converging. And very clearly, the top line shows that China had inflated everything. And why did they inflate is interesting again. They inflated because there were two guys called Long Li and Zhai Zhenwu, researchers, Chinese researchers, in 2014 published a paper predicting that if the two-child policy were implemented, this is on record, their fertility rate would rise to 4.5 with 49.95 million births per year. They frightened their leaders into not implementing the two-child policy and only a selective one here. Right? All the while showing this when the actuality was this. By making this kind of false theories, China has consigned itself to a place where it cannot retrieve itself. Okay. Now comes let me go to the foreign affairs analysis. Now, what I'm going to say is applicable largely to everyone, but probably a little more applicable to China. Where it is applicable to China, I'll highlight it. But this is not against China. Both these articles are general trend lines. I am deriving what is for China from these articles, and then we'll see how to handle it. He says aging population slows economic growth, no doubt. Greater spending has to be undertaken by all governments on welfare of elderly citizens. That also, there is just no doubt on that. Okay. Now, governments will be forced to attend to their aging populations as population ages, and they will have a shrinking pool of resources because the working age population is increasing. You see this in Europe, you see this in America, you see this in South Korea. And then they make a generic statement. Aging significantly reduces the likelihood of war between states. You apply it to Europe, it's true. Europe doesn't want war. Korea, Japan, they're not interested. They become pacifist states, they're old states, old age societies. And China is fast heading into that. And he says, tendency to fight wars is stronger in countries with younger populations. That is why you see Pakistan, you see African states, right? Why USA continues to fight wars? Because it maintains its profile relatively young through immigration. It says the coming age of old and shrinking populations will change geopolitics. It's already happening. Aging populations don't have the resources for war. Because if aging reduces economic growth, the amount you can spend on war reduces. Okay. Aging makes countries less dynamic and less capable of funding wars. Very fundamental. The workers are reduced, productivity is reduced, old age people are not so productive, and domestic consumption reduces. And one of the articles says between 2020 and 2050, East Asia's population will shrink by 24%. Japan's working age population is expected to shrink by 28%. China's by 23%, Russia by 19%, and Germany by 17%. In the big population countries, large population countries, China is leading the way. It's going to lose 23% of its working force by 2050. In 5 years, it would have lost a lot. Okay. Very fundamental, an old age workforce is less productive. An interesting fact which they bring out in this analysis is people are most productive when they are in the 40s. They have knowledge, they have experience, they have resources, the workers are younger, energy, all that. This is the peak. And when this share between 40 to 50 rises, productivity, everything rises. Right? Now, as countries age, this group of 48 to 50 is going to reduce. And over 50 will increase, which means the productivity goes down. And here comes the crunch of what I'm talking of China. In Russia, this crucial share for productivity growth will shrink by 10%, 2020 to 2050. Okay? In Japan by 15% and China by 18%. China is the complete outlier, an extreme position in all this demographic change which is going to happen. Okay? And whatever change is happening in China is a factor of all minorities. Remember this: Tibetans, Mongolians, Uyghurs, and then Han. Right? The Han, Mongolian, and Tibetan populations are stable and probably increasing. Not Han. Uyghur, Tibetan, and Mongolian. It is the Han population which is decreasing. So when someone says 18% of China, it is that 90% of Han which is decreasing. So actually, the Han population is the worst affected. Well, everyone says, and I'm sure many of you would have also said, widespread adoption of AI could help reverse these trends. That's what everyone says. Oh, China is adopting AI, robotics, yeah, whoa, hence it doesn't need manpower. Well, we have to rethink this whole dynamic. Why? What was Japan's lost decade all about? When did the IT boom happen? The IT boom happened in the 1990s, 2010, up to 2010-15. Isn't it? It didn't help Japan. And Japan was still one of the leading IT powers at that time. Japan, just nothing happened in Japan. Japan still went down. Same thing will happen in China. There are metrics available now. And AI is not going to pay China. That is already evident in the fact that Xi Jinping is now saying, rethink of everyone getting into AI. Rethink everyone getting into high productive forces. Rethink everyone getting into EV, solar, and all high tech. They've crowded the whole thing, which will not. It's automatic internal collapse, and that's the story of China. So there is a demographic problem which is happening, and there is a societal problem which is happening, and a government problem which is happening, and it is unfolding in front of our eyes. And many of us are stupid enough to think that AI and robotics and high tech will bail China out. It didn't bail Japan out. It's not going to bail China out. And this is my prediction. They go on to prove Japan's highly productive workforce, 14 to 49 cohort, peaked in 1991. And then between 95 and 2005, just 10 years, it plummeted by 29%. That productive workforce. You take this 20 to this 40 to 49 in China and see what is going to happen in the next decade. I've not done that. I've not got the figures for it, but I'll do it. And then you'll see stark things coming out. I'm sure of it. Now, look at South Korea. South Korea is the front runner for this entire business of depopulation, aging, and all that. Analysis suggests that South Korea's population, if it is declining at over 3% per year, it will crash by 95% over a century because it's 3% compounded every year. So whatever happens in South Korea is going to happen to the rest of the world. So that's the forerunner. A lot of what happening in South Korea and a lot of what happened in Japan will happen in China, and that will be magnified. And this is demographic. I've not come to CCP. Okay. China is going through a birth crash. Everyone knows it. The next generation, 20 years hence, is on track to be only half as large as the preceding one. There is a problem of reduced workforce and turbocharged population aging. We've got the figures. There is an important thing. China had an extended family system, which is the fundamental of their social networks. So societal networks, not social networks, societal network. The social safety net. That has disintegrated with the one-child system. They don't have a social net. I mean, I keep saying this. They don't have brothers, sisters. This is a country without brothers, sisters, uncles, and aunties. So this is, the economy is slowing. Your people are aging. Your social safety net is broken. Or it's not there, in fact. The floor is shifted. So what about so China, the Communist Party of China has to institute new social welfare measures, which it is not able to do. If it is not able to do, what do you do with these old people? Which means China has to recalibrate its international ambitions. Will it be able to do so? That is the dichotomy in China. Because whatever is happening societally, the Chinese Communist Party understands it but cannot deal with it. It has not dealt with it. Whatever it has dealt with it at superficial levels. Because the interest of the Chinese Communist Party is to hold on to power. If they do these societal measures X, Y, Z, they lose power. If they lose power, they're out. And to do power is external and internal. When the internal power is going down, they have to focus on external power. External power costs money. So if China is funding the Tibet Dam, if China is funding space exploration, if China is funding, AI, its great navy, all that, it is spending less on old people. It is spending less than on social welfare measures. Somewhere this imbalance will start speaking. That is why I keep saying China is an imbalanced nation today. It's out of balance. And then these analyses suggest that domestic consumption is 2/3 of an economy. Okay. Then aging, in aging states, the people who spend most are 20 to 40, children 20 to 40. People of my age don't spend. No, this kind of a weak consumption, everything, has already contributed to China's housing market collapse. Who will buy houses? People who are younger, who are starting their careers. They have a dream. I'll have a family, I'll have a wife, I'll have a scooter, I'll have a car, I'll have a home. In China, people have stopped dreaming that, and that is why the houses are not being sold. The earlier generation had this dream, they held a house. Today, that house can't be sold for their own sustenance. So the old people can't do anything. The young people are not interested. The housing market is collapsing, and demographically, this is not going to reverse. Demand has crashed, and housing and infrastructure remain the biggest contributors of economy of a nation, any nation. In China, that is now China is trying to keep infrastructure up through the dam on Tibet and roads and high-speed rails and all. But when will they start bearing fruits? They'll start bearing fruits. The Tibet dam will not give them electricity for the next 10 years. By then, their economy will be so badly off, they might not be able to afford it. That's my prediction. And China's economy is completely stagnant at this point of time. If you have economic power, you can reach your international goals. You don't have, forget it. You don't have economic power, you will not wage wars. And if you are an aging society, you don't have economic vitality, you will not fight wars. And old people don't fight, but they're greedy. They want everything. They'll try to get someone else to do it. That is why China is riding on Pakistan. That is why China wants to go to Africa. They want younger populations to work for them and feed them. Greed. That is the Chinese communist method. We have to understand this nonsense. Right? In developed countries, the expenditure on public pensions and elderly pension is approximately 25% of the GDP. It's going up, and it's likely to hit 25% by 2050. Maybe today it's 10, 11, 12%. In China, this figure is hovering about 7 to 8%. By 2030, 10% of Chinese GDP will have to be spent on old age pensions. That's the minimum. If China spends 10% on old age pensions, what will happen to its expenditure on defense? What will happen to its expenditure to internal security? We all hear of it. I have not seen any Chinese budget which says I'll spend 10% on pensions. In fact, their pensions are slated to run out by 2035, and this is their own assessment. And that figure after 2030, the 10% is going to increase geometrically. You have to understand this phenomenon which is happening. We refuse to understand it. And then if you are an old age country, you have to spend more on domestic welfare security. Domestic security becomes important. If domestic security is not there, you see, it's like this. Every old age country will import some kind of people to continue as their workforce. It happened in Germany. Well, in fact, in Europe, a lot of Muslims have gone there and they're procreating like peanuts. And the old white Europeans, they want to keep control of their destinies and countries. So there's social tensions. Will that happen in China? Question mark. Even if that doesn't happen in China, okay, already there are very clear indications that their domestic security measures are going up. Today, the domestic budget of China, security budget of China, is more than the external budget. Virtually, there's no other country which is in the league. Now, as this aging society increases, workforce reduces. Aging society also means decrease in workforce. So this imbalance in military spending and security spending will come to the fore. People have to think why they should spend on military and why they should not spend on old people. And Chinese government, whichever government is there, will have to think very hard. Does the CCP have a realization of this? They understand it. Can they do anything? No. The political compulsions of being in power might drive them to do something different. Okay. Then there's another metric. I'm giving you metrics. If government spending on social welfare and elderly crosses 25% of a budget, after all, the government welfare schemes have to education, agriculture, these are all welfare schemes to a large extent. If it crosses 25% of the budget, their capability to initiate a military conflict reduces. Many aged countries are already on the verge of that or they have crossed. China is also in that cusp. But China is ruled by the CCP, which might not agree to this. In which case, there will be internal problems in China. And to some extent, you're seeing this. It's not reported, but it's happening. We don't understand the undercurrents of China because of the information, lack of information about China, which we have. Okay, then let's look at military. Which is the people who want to join military? You want young people to join the military. Agniveers, we made such a hue and cry, youth, age profile. If you have fewer military people, you would go for more mechanization. Or you want as many military people, then you have to go for aged people. Is the age military good? Or a younger military good? Younger military. But if you have the pool of your military is less, from where you can get from the population is less. Those young people will not prefer the military. They will go elsewhere. The number is less, demand and supply. So to get the younger number, you have to pay them more. So if you have to pay them more, how will you spend on weapons? You can't do everything. And China is already facing this problem. Because if you see the benefits being given to PLA people, even for 2 years, after all, they have this guys who serve only for 2 years. Okay. Their pay scales, their perks have increased astronomically. And still, PLA doesn't get what it wants. PLA and China has a shortage of skilled soldiers. And if you reduce standards, you'll get a substandard military. And my guess, I'm not my guess, my 100% thing is, at the ground level, the Chinese soldiers are not that skilled. They're weak. And this is one of the 6 incapables of PLA, which I've always spoken of. It is okay for China to conduct operations in isolation, small operations and all that. When it comes to bigger operations, they back off. We've seen it happen. They didn't get into a full fight with India because fundamentally at the lower level they are weak. They withdrew. They didn't do anything to upset the balance in the Middle East. They didn't show all this talk of PLA going to conquer the world, Chinese Navy to be all over the Indian Ocean and all that has come to naught. These are things which are happening. We have to understand this fundamental. Don't get blindsided by one-track ideas about China. Militaries can substitute technology. I mean, you can use technology and substitute personnel through technology. But then military fundamental thing which you do in the military is labor intensive. You can have AI, you can have EW, you can have everything. So will your enemy. He might not have that kind of AI which you have, but there's a limit to which you can use AI and communications and networking in the armed forces. And in the India-China equation, there's severe limitations. Let me tell you this. These days, some PLA chap has put out 6 chapters of a book in Twitter. A lot of people have read it. You read that, you'll understand. Something like a memoirs of a Chinese soldier in Eastern Ladakh. AI doesn't work there. All these things don't work there. What works there is pure guts. An old age military will not work there. In a particular sector, if there's a thing which is sectoral in a particular area, yeah, you'll get the best soldiers and put them. That's how China does it. But if the war widens, China will struggle. If you're going to get into counterinsurgency, China will struggle. Why am I saying counterinsurgency? If you instigate, or if Tibet tomorrow starts fighting for self-determination, Tibetans, and India supports it, China will struggle. I won't do it today. And that is why I won't do it today. I'll do it 5 years hence. That is why China is worried about Dalai Lama. What Dalai Lama has initiated is not a problem for today. Reincarnation. When, like I say, reincarnation is going to happen when His Holiness passes away. And after that, the search will start. That will take another 3-4 years. And then the Dalai Lama will be found and he will be groomed. Another 10 years. You're looking at a 15-20 years horizon. And in this, if the Chinese do something and the Tibetans think differently because their religious beliefs have been upset, and insurgency starts in Tibet. And for starting an insurgency, you need 3% of people. 3%. Bye-bye China. And no amount of effort by China is working. On the other hand, their metrics are decreasing. Many times I've come in front of you and said how their marriages are falling by the year, births are falling by the year, female infanticide is increasing by the year. So China has severe limitations. In 5 years, you mark my words, I keep saying in every analysis of such sort, non-military analysis about China, 5 years more and China will be a different nation, India will be a different nation. These idiots from Pakistan don't understand. The idiots from China who come and troll here also don't understand. They know, but they will troll to project something different. So it's going to be very difficult for China to get hold of capable soldiers. Even capital intensive warfare, to get AI and robotics and satellites and all this, you need capable people to handle them. Where are you going to get them from? It's nice to say, I have the capability to go to moon, but how does it manifest on ground? There's yet another issue. How will aging societies adjust to the fact that their children are dying? And in China, this is a problem. There's a huge societal problem. which we have probably, if I didn't read this, I wouldn't have understood it. Already in China, there are a lot of people. You see, life and death is normal. It happens every day. People die. If I die today, well, I have two sisters, right? My children will have two aunties still. My mother still have two daughters and things like that. I have two children. One of them will look after me, or my wife if I die. So we are in a talking of a societally different net. What happens if it happens in China today? What if I'm a Chinese and my son dies? He's the only chap. He's the only chap. I'm not talking of his dying in war. He dies in an accident. He dies out of some. I don't have anyone else. Societally, there are so many people who are dying. Young people in China who are dying, or COVID, or whatever. This figure in China is growing. They're all called Shidu. And if this is compounded by a large war, where does China go? And if this increases, people will come on streets. Because I'm going to be old. I don't have a son or a daughter, whoever it is. If I have a son or a daughter who's married and they have a son, at least there's some hope. What if my only son or daughter has died? To any reason. And what if it gets compounded by war? I don't have a pension. What happens to me? I'll get onto the streets. And that's happening in China. We have to understand this phenomenon. Okay. So why will I send my son or daughter to the military? Again, this is a fact which is happening. Yeah, but there's another thing. If your military capabilities are shrinking, your population is shrinking, you as a military leader or as a national leader, as Xi Jinping, will think, yeah, he knows. I'm sure the Chinese know this problem. They'll say, look, I have another 5 years. After that, my window closes. So should I press the trigger today? And that is why I keep saying, this is my firm conviction, 2030. 2030 is the magic figure. 2030 is the magic figure in the way I look at it. When the window for China closes. After that, China can't fight a war. Take it from me. Forget their AI, forget their robotics, forget everything else. There are going to be social pressures within China. You'll see a different China in 5 years. This is my prediction. And then India will also be somewhere else. We'll talk of that separately. The differential is closing. When people say, oh, their economy is 5 times your economy, it doesn't matter. Economies matter nothing. Figures matter nothing. We have to understand what's coming ahead. Already, a lot of what I have said has come true. And what I'm going to say, what I have said in this, watch this video after 5 years and then ask me. We'll discuss this. Okay. So what do we do? What does India do till then? Keep quiet. Keep fighting with them. India does this. You have to hold the dragon by its tail so that it doesn't go anywhere. Do you fight the dragon? You'll be a fool if you fight the dragon. We don't have to fight the dragon. But we can fight the support system of the dragon, which is Pakistan. Will the dragon fight with us? We have to be very clear. My guess is it will not. I I take 5, 6 inputs into this. Their past behavior, their demography, what USA is doing to them. Let me tell you, a lot of people say, look, USA has come into Pakistan and Pakistan has become important for USA. And, we are not so important to USA. I'm very happy. Whatever Pakistan and USA relationship is going, it's against China. It's sorting it out. It is sorting Pakistan out in a manner which it is sorting China out in a manner which I started comprehending only now. And I'll talk of it in a day or two. Okay? So, we need to think differently. How do you tackle China? Aging China. Should you put them in an internal situation? Should you hit their resource base? Should you start a psychological narrative? And China is going to be greedy. Old age people want to be greedy because they want to live forever. And they want to be living comfortably. These are major questions which we have to answer for ourselves. I've explained to you as to what will be the aging effects, repercussions, and we need to maximize all those issues. Well, this is all I had. So I'll take a few questions. I'll keep this picture in front. Remember it. Amongst nations today, it is only India which still has the ability to hold the dragon by its tail. Dynamics around India are changing. We have to respond. You'll see in all my analysis, I analyze China in the longer horizon, but give recommendations for action in the shorter horizon. Right? So I would like you to understand this dichotomy in my own talk. Okay. With this, I've come to the end.